cut out murder scenes on the telly, cut out sex.
It's not usually on late at night, and the people who watch it have probably done it anyway.
Good evening. Last week I said that this week would be about sex and violence on TV. I shouldn't have done. Karen Shaw from Bedford writes...
Dear Nick, let me be the one to break it to you. Sex and violence are two completely different experiences. Try them and see.
Quite so, Karen. And quite so, Brian Collins, too, from Derby Green in Surrey.
Pink champagne and horse manure make an equally suitable pair. Violence is degrading, obscene. Sex, I claim no vast experience, is... well, it's not bad, really, is it?
In fact, many of your fair comments have asked for more sex on TV, and we'll hear those in a moment. Hardly anyone seems to want more violence. But let's start with the conventional attack that there's far too much of both.
I'm given a TV diet of violence, crime, cruelty and sexual couplings. Programme planners seem to have embraced the idea that the nation ought to be moronised, a word I've invented, or feasted on brutality. Kay Jackson, Whitstable, Kent.
And R. Bennett, a primary school headmaster from Liscarden, Cornwall, warns...
One day all writers, producers, directors, actors, cameramen and everyone else involved in peddling impurity and degradation will wake up to realise that to work against the perfect love and purpose of God is to incur his judgment. Why do you do it?
Well, the man to answer that is here. He's Will Wyatt, a senior BBC executive and chairman of a committee looking at the portrayal of violence on TV. Well, why does the BBC do it?
Well, I honestly don't recognise that it does it in the terms that those letters said. And I think it's worth, if you look through the Radio Times of a week, it's absolutely clear there are far, far more programmes which have no sex and no violence in the terms that we're now talking about them, than those which have any of either. So I think that's the basis on which you've got to look at all such complaints like that.
Well, you say that. I mean, letter here, for example, from Reginald Tett of Surbiton in Surrey. So often I'm ashamed at that which is put on our screens that I have to switch off. I mean, other people's perceptions are very different from yours.
Well, I think in terms of what's in the programmes, perhaps in terms of the kind of programmes which have sex or have violence, there aren't very many in toto. When it comes to what irritates or offends individual people, well, people can switch off and obviously do. And I think it would be absolutely impossible to make any kind of television service that tried to make a whole range of programmes, entertaining, informing, educating and so on, which didn't deal with the world as it really is, rather than as some of us would rather have it.
Well, as I said, we've had many letters, in fact, which have been supporting the BBC's position, and a number of your fair comments have called for more sex on TV. In fact, Roger Greenland from Hollyport in Berkshire warns...
If Mrs Whitehouse and her supporters had had their way, we wouldn't have had such programmes as Cathy Come Home, Z-Cars, numerous plays for today, Casanova, Boys from the Black Stuff, The History Man, I, Claudius, and probably hundreds of others.
What's more, says Elaine Royf from Leeds, the portrayal of sex is actually beneficial.
Bare boobs reflect a more honest approach to sex. Attitudes have been broadened and there's more understanding and tolerance because of its exposure on television.
And T.W. Varley of North London complains...
Sex on TV? Well, there practically isn't any. What form of popular entertainment is never seen on television? Answer, striptease. Why not? That's a serious question.
Now, why not, Will Wyatt?
Well, there are things which are suitable for putting on in a club or a cinema that are not suitable for television. Television, after all, goes directly into people's homes, and you don't have to go out and buy it. And I'd say striptease is there. If people want it, they can go and see it. But in the same way that there are movies which are shown in cinemas, commercial cinemas, which we wouldn't buy and wouldn't transmit because of their content. So I think there is a difference. I've never heard of a call for striptease before on television. But
well, maybe not particularly for striptease, but for a more open attitude. Rupert Bullock, writing from Stroud in Gloucester, says that the audience seems to be regarded either as a host of young children or prudish elderly spinsters. And John Morris, writing from Redditch in Worcester, says there's obviously demand for this sort of entertainment with more openness about sex. Why is it that it's only the licence payers, which he regards as a minority who complain, that you take notice of?
Well, I hope we don't think of the audience, the viewers, as any one particular group. After all, it's the great generality of the viewers and the licence payers that we're broadcasting to. And we hope that over a period of time we make a sufficiently interesting, attractive, entertaining, informative mix of programmes that you can appeal to all those minorities. And I think that one group must remember that the other group is watching at the same time as well. And if they don't get exactly what they want all the time, it's because somebody else perhaps is getting their turn or their kind of programme, because that's the sort of consideration that the programme makers have to bear in mind, that lots of different kinds of people are watching every programme.
Well, one of those groups is a bit worried. They're more liberal-minded as they'd see themselves. Martin Lewis, writing from Barrow-in-Furness and Cumbria, was shocked when one of the BBC executives admitted on this programme a few weeks ago that he wouldn't show programmes today that were thought acceptable in the 1960s. That's when the head of Light Entertainment said he would no longer show Till Death Us Do Part.
Well, I'd respect his judgment on that. I think one of the things that you have to bear in mind is that things don't get progressively more liberal or progressively less liberal. Society is changing all the time, and that means the kind of things that we can transmit and seem right at any given moment also have to change. I would have thought that a consideration with Till Death would be the racial remarks that used to be in the script. They were very funny, but it was a thing not much talked about then. Sensibilities about racial matters are much different now, and what was suitable then may well seem not quite so funny in the sort of context that we've had in this country in the past couple of years.
Well, let's move on now to sensibilities about violence.
I think there's too much violence. I think it is more harm than anything, really.
I'm not particularly sold on violence for kids. It's probably an opportunity for them to go out and practice it if they're the right age.
The violence and the crime, I think it's absolutely terrible. And for anyone, any one of you, anyone at all to tell me that it does not influence the younger mind is absolute nonsense and rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
It's far nicer to leave it more to the imagination than actually showing.
I think if it's presented in a fairly crude, perhaps nasty way, rape, this sort of type of thing, I don't like watching that.
As so many fair comments point out, portraying sex is very different from showing violence. According to Alison Wright of Rayleigh in Essex, sex is normal, but brutality must not be encouraged.
I firmly believe that by replacing violence by showing normal sex will result in a move away from violent actions, perhaps even to a more caring society. Let's have more mild blue films and less violence.
And C. Richard of Northampton, who feels the same, thinks that the BBC is being hypocritical.
You find sex offensive and don't show it, yet you show a type of glamorised violence that to me is totally irresponsible. You show violence all the time, but what is worse is that the way you show it makes it look sort of fun. For example, the American Cops series show guns like they're toys, and you show the violence like it doesn't hurt.
And from M. Wilson of Netherton, Bootle, Merseyside.
I have worked in a large hospital for many years. This has included casualty and receiving the dead from road accidents and other violent deaths. But this is a part of violence nobody wants to see. Anyone can feel gutsy fantasising the shootings, beatings and rapings, but you never see the same people in the public service where things are raw and real.
Well, Mr. Wilson goes on, there is nothing glamorous in blood, pain and broken bodies. Isn't the BBC glamorising violence?
Well, I honestly don't think so, and I think on that very good point that he's made there, we try in quite a lot of programmes to show the reality of violence. A lot of documentaries and the current affairs reporting over the past few years have shown people what life is like in the difficult areas where people do the sort of job that Mr. Wilson was obviously doing. I can think of the series about hospital 2 or 3 years ago, in which one episode was in a casualty ward.
But that's really not what the complaints are about. The complaints are about chiefly drama, and a lot of the complaints are about the sort of American imports where people are shot, you never see the grief, you never see the suffering, and in fact, as many point out, there's a hypocrisy. We worry too much about showing blood and not enough about not showing it.
Well, I think quite a lot of, if I could finish, the blood that is shown in terms of the hospital programmes or the programmes about West Beirut or anything like that, do remind people that in the reality these things are there. I think in the COPS programmes, it's very important that overall it's clear that the fact that violence means people are hurt, injured and is a nasty thing is the overriding impression of most of the programmes. I think quite often there's such a thing as stylized violence, you know, in the same way that in cowboy films there used to be knockabout or the cartoons and so on, and it's quite clear that a fight between two cowboys in a bar is a sort of ritualistic thing, and I think adults, children are capable of seeing that and they realise that it's not actually reality. In the same way, I think quite a lot of those cops and robbers programmes are in the same kind of thing. They're a sort of moving life cartoon. I think there's a problem, and it is difficult when it gets away from that, and I think there are films which have been very difficult in that way.
It doesn't worry you that the BBC probably shows more killings in some weeks than actually occur throughout the whole of the United Kingdom in a year?
Well, showing them in depends on exactly what kind of thing you are showing.
As entertainment, often.
Well, entertainment, if, as I say, they're in the context of a kind of sort of strip cartoon, is one thing. If it were the case that actually what was being shown were really nasty, close-up things of life around us today that made it look as though Britain today was full of people killing each other when they're not, that would be quite a difficult thing. But I think cars chasing each other in Los Angeles is quite different from young people doing beastly things to each other in Britain, down the road in Sheffield, Leeds, or wherever else it might be. And I think the viewers are, by and large, quite capable of seeing that and drawing that kind of distinction.
Well, there are those who think that there's nothing wrong with violence on TV, and in fact pour scorn on the idea that it has any ill effects at all. Michaela Brook from Coventry says that most children like her just take it in their stride.
If I watch a film to do with a robbery, I wouldn't go out and copy it, so it doesn't have that kind of influence on me. It's not the TV that makes the world, it's the world that makes the TV.
And Michaela's schoolmate, Helen Wade, adds this.
As for children seeing adult programmes late at night, well, it's life, and they'll see things like that sooner or later anyway. I don't think violent programmes should be stopped, because I like watching them and I'm not violent.
In fact, could it be that there's too much mollycoddling?
I don't think so. I think you've got to be jolly careful with something like violence. It's heartening to hear children who say that, but I think if one's going to err on the side of caution in taking great care about the way you portray violence, how often you portray it, how closely the violent incidents or programs are grouped together. As I started out by saying, most programs don't have any in, and against that kind of background, I think it's then quite proper that sometimes you can deal with it in a serious way and later in the evening, and when you hope far fewer, if any, children are watching.
I mean, you've spent a lot of time doing a note of guidance to BBC producers. Frankly, is there sufficient control? Is there too much censorship? What sort of notice do most people in the BBC take of this sort of thing, and to what extent do they just go their own way?
Well, a note like that doesn't happen in isolation. After all, people here mostly worked here for some time. There's a system that's been in operation for some time in terms of the way producers relate to their writers, the way the producers relate to their heads of department and the senior officials, and so on. So over a period of time, people know, or they ought to know, when they've got a problem, when there's something difficult, and to talk to somebody else about it. So it's not a matter of people going around saying cut out the violence or put more violence in or anything like that. It's a matter of a process by which you have an understanding of what is proper to put in a programme and what is not. And after all, we're only making programmes for the viewers. That's what we have to do. Too much of any of these things is counterproductive. If people don't like it, switch off, scream with complaint, then clearly we have it wrong, and we have to know about that. And that is also a kind of regulating factor that no producer, after all, wants people rushing to the switch, as your correspondent earlier on did, to say, I switched it off. If people keep doing that, clearly he's not a successful producer.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you too for your fair comments. Next week is the last in our series when we'll be hearing your fair comments on fair comment itself. We've already had a number of letters, like this one from Douglas Jack, who complains that fair comment is a bland and embarrassingly unctuous interviewer. Thank you, Mr. Jack. Well, does the BBC really take any notice of letters like this? Any notice of you, the licence payers? Or are programmes like Fair Comment little better than a con? Alternatively, does the BBC perhaps pander too much to pressure groups? Your letters, please, and your photo too, if you like. The address is coming up. There should be fireworks next week. Till then, good night.